Well, thank you, Mike, for meeting with me. Just to let you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to hear about you are the current incumbent, correct?
Yes. Hmm.
Yes. What is it that made you decide that you wanted to be a police officer and then become the sheriff?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've been in law enforcement for 28 years. The majority of that time I actually spent in a police department. I was working with Pleasant Grove Police Department. During that time, I moved through the ranks. I became a sergeant, lieutenant, a captain, and was hired as the chief of police of Pleasant Grove. Uh, During that same time, I'd been a reserve deputy with the Utah County Sheriff's Department, and I had also been on the SWAT team for 18 years. I'd been a team leader and a forward operations commander on that team. And just real quick, I have, as well as those things, I have a degree in associate's degree in criminal justice and a bachelor's degree in emergency management administration, as well as I'm a graduate of the FBI National Academy. So last term, when the seat for sheriff was open, when the current sheriff decided he was going to retire and not run, I was approached by a lot of people, including many chiefs of police, asking if I would be interested in running for sheriff. I was very happy in my position at Pleasant Grove and ultimately did some soul searching and got with my wife, and it really came down to us making this decision together because it is a team effort. And so we made that decision and I ran for sheriff.
And what has it been like? So how many years ago? Last term, so 2 years?
No, it's 4 years.
4 years.
So yeah, so this will be the fourth year of being a sheriff.
And how has that changed? We moved here from Washington State and we saw a lot in the last couple of years. I'm just wondering what that's been like in Utah.
Yeah, so there's been a ton happen in those 4 years, right? I mean, and for me, I actually took office early. I had won the primary election, and the sheriff decided to retire early, and so I took office in August instead of at the first of the year. And then it was like 2 weeks later, the whole south end of Utah County was on fire in wildland fires. We evacuated 2 cities and many county neighborhoods over that fire. It was a large fire. So we started with that. We went into a worldwide pandemic, which was coupled with all of the things that happened with police reform and the protests and the riots and everything that as a result of that. Well, and on top of that, you have a presidential election that happened with a new administration coming in. And so you have all the fears of everybody that, voted one way or voted the other way of, how are these things going to change? How are our constitutional rights going to be upheld? Is this new administration going to violate those rights? So all of those things, of course, were huge, and they became issues immediately, the things that we had to work through, things that we had to deal with. And they have resulted in, the reality is in a very tough term to be a sheriff.
Right. And so that's what I wanted to know, breaking that up into 2 separate areas. First, as I asked the person who's running against you, emotionally, what is the toll that it takes currently with all of the anti-police sentiment? Or do you not really feel a lot of that sentiment here specifically in Utah County?
I don't think it's as bad as in some areas. The things that spike that, they weren't things that were occurring here in Utah, but it was felt across the nation without a doubt. We felt it here. We had problems in Salt Lake. Salt Lake, saw major damage done to the city, injuries to police officers. We had protests in Provo. We had a citizen who was shot during one of those protests in Provo. So we definitely felt it here. We stepped up as a sheriff's office to support all of our neighboring agencies, our police departments, and offer resources and aid. And we were very involved in doing that. And it's interesting, I think countywide, I don't think that sentiment is necessarily widespread by any means. A lot of the people that we dealt with that came down to this area, they weren't from Utah County. They came in from other areas. And so,
like you had to deal with Antifa type things? Did Antifa come here?
Well, without putting any, there were several different names in it without labeling any of them. I think there were many of those acronyms that are associated with that movement that were here.
Oh, wow. I was not aware of that. That probably would have made us go somewhere else for a landing place. But All right. So how about with that, and you said the sentiment isn't widespread here, but what are you doing as the police department to kind of, or anything to build relationships with the community?
Yeah, we actually do quite a bit with public outreach. One of the first things, as a chief of police, I'd worked on it quite a bit. We had created some programs in the city, and here's the reality: is being a chief of police in a city is a little bit different than being a sheriff. There's a different feel there. So when you work in a city, that city sees you as you are their police department, right? So who is the sheriff's department? It's everybody's, but at the same time, the cities are doing their jobs that statutorily and constitutionally they need to do. And so the citizens view it that way. So it's a little bit different feel. So we actually have done several things. We started an honorary colonels program, which is a program that they're actually their own entity now. They function on their own. They're a 501c3, and they are a group of professionals or just people throughout the community that become members of it. And we meet with them once a month, and we talk about the sheriff's office. We talk about the needs. They, can bring us any issues that they're seeing or hearing. And so we work with them on those type of things. Another thing we did that's been a passion of mine is through my time with law enforcement, school safety has been huge for me. I actually, as a SWAT team leader, worked with the state school board. We put together a training protocol that went out to all of the districts throughout the state, and we would go around and help them train that. They actually made a couple videos based off that won national awards. So something I'd always wanted to do, but as a chief of police didn't quite fit, but was to do a training for teachers to help them deal with active shooter situations. So we put together what's called the Teachers Academy, which actually got a ton of interest nationally, of interest of what are you guys doing? And the reality is what we're doing is we're helping teachers learn how to, well, some of the first things that you wouldn't think we would teach is we teach mindfulness in the class. We teach de-escalation, so how to de-escalate, that's one of the most favorite topics of the Teachers Academy is these, because de-escalation you can use in everyday life, right? Every time you're talking to a student, a parent, whatever, those skills are huge. We've actually done retrainers for some of the alumni of Teachers Academy that have been like week-long classes just on that. We also teach tactical trauma, so how to deal with, if you're in a situation where somebody is shot or hurt seriously, how to deal with that, and they leave with a first aid kit that has tourniquets and gauze and things to pack a wound. We put them in a simulator. They get a chance to go into a simulator and see, it's like 320-degree screens around you, and they deal with an active shooter situation. We teach them self-defense, and we go over firearm safety. They actually, if they'd like a concealed weapons permit, they'll leave with one. We actually take them up on the range and they do live fire. And the reality is, what I found is a lot of teachers around the state are actually carrying guns to school. And the districts have kind of a don't ask, don't tell policy. So there's no training, there's nothing for them. And so the point of our training wasn't to say you're a professional now, carry a gun to school. In fact, we've had several teachers who have went through the training and decided not to carry because they have seen that they're not proficient and they're not ready to take that responsibility upon themselves. So which is good. So if you want to do it, you need to get in the proper trainings, and we give them resources to go do that and get your proficiencies up. But the reality in the nation is it's about 3 minutes. So if you're in an active shooter situation, statistically across the nation, it takes about 3 minutes for law enforcement to get there. In a school, many times there's a school resource officer already there. So that's bringing those numbers way down, right? So our whole point is we love the lockdown system. We're not teaching teachers to go out and get aggressive and stop something. We're teaching them, do your lockdowns, do what the school is telling you, but if somebody does get into your room or you're found in a situation where lockdown didn't work, what are you going to do in those 3 minutes? Are you expected just to, lay down and play dead, or do you have a plan? So we help them develop that plan, because the sad reality is that person is there to kill them and everyone else they can. So we help them strategically deal with that, and to really have a plan in place. And that's been huge. We've also worked on, we do all sorts of other public outreach. We do some meet and greets. We do other things. I'll tell you what, COVID, of course, killed most of those type of programs. Most
Right.
of those were dead in the water for several years, and now they're just starting to come back open so we can start doing things. So we've done a lot of things. If you look at the sheriff's website, we moved most of the stuff we're doing onto Facebook, just trying to do it by video, right? Because we couldn't reach out, we couldn't be out in the community.
For like the youth though, I know that I work in a school, and I know that like TikTok and other social media platforms are pretty big with the youth, and they have not all, because there's both sides usually, but there's a very heavy leaning towards an anti-police sentiment. Are you doing anything to work with kids to educate the youth to what the police really are, or to build that relationship with the youth?
Yes, absolutely. We have the schools that we are over. We have school resource officers that are in those schools. We also have NOVA. I don't know if you know what NOVA is if you're not from the area. Are you familiar with DARE?
Yes.
So NOVA, we switched over to NOVA. NOVA stands for Nurturing Opportunities, Values, and Accountability, because we felt the curriculum in NOVA, it's much the same as DARE, although it adds in accountability, because we all need to be accountable for our actions, right? So we looked through the curriculum, we felt it was better. So we switched over to NOVA. We teach that in the schools as well. And to your point, those are huge. And, at times you'll get somebody or budget people that are working on a budget going, is this position necessary? Is it worth it? And my answer always is, let's go to a community event. You step back and watch this NOVA officer and just watch what happens. And kids will come up and they're so excited to see their NOVA teacher. They have these connections. It's awesome. I think the benefits outweigh any of those concerns, because it is very, very effective in connecting with those kids and having them have this positive interaction with law enforcement.
And what ages are those for?
That's usually in either 5th or 6th grade.
Okay. So for like the high school age, nothing?
We do have our SROs that are in the schools, and they're very, very active in those schools, meeting with the kids. In some of the cases, they'll participate in teaching in certain classes and criminal justice platforms, things like that.
Great. Okay. That's great. I just remember being a kid, and you'd get the little tricycle that looked like a police officer, or the kids would wear or drive around wanting to be police. And lately that's just been something very different. So you talked about mindfulness. I want to know diversity, equity, and inclusion in the police department.
Yeah.
What does that look like? What are you guys doing there?
So,
and do you agree with what's being done? Because I know that from a federal level, people are having to do certain things. So
yeah, well, from a federal level, even from a state level. So when all of this police reform came out, I don't know if you remember one of the catchphrases that came out. It's not really a catchphrase, but it became, in kind of a thrown out there phrase, was implicit biases, right?
Right.
So, you'd get the questions all the time, hey, are you teaching your deputies about implicit biases? So, the answer would be, okay, what's that training? And crickets, right? Because there really wasn't anything out there that was, it was being thrown in the face of law enforcement, but there really wasn't anything out there was like, yep, this is the training, get your officer into this. So what we did, we looked into a few of them, and some of them were, we'll come out, and one of them in particular, they wouldn't even tell us the curriculum. They just said, we'll come out and we will identify your problems, because in the end, everybody's a racist. They just don't know it. And you're going, okay, but how does that help us? So one of the things, I am a huge fan of the Arbinger Institute. I don't know if you've read any of their stuff.
I'm not familiar with it, no.
I love the Arbinger Institute. They have books such as The Anatomy of Peace, Leadership and Self-Deception, The Outward Mindset. So basically the premise of a lot of that is, like, the outward mindset is turning yourself outward towards others. And it's really the root core of the whole training is to the golden rule, to do unto others as you would have done unto you, and to treat people like people. So I reached out to Arbinger. I was able to secure a contract with them. I and a few of my deputies, because we wanted this to be something that we could carry on. So myself and a few of my employees became facilitators of Arbinger so that we could teach it. And so we've brought the Arbinger Institute outward mindset to the sheriff's office and everybody right now. I mean, it's a big lift. We have, I don't think people realize how many employees we have. We have about 550 employees.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
So, we're about a quarter of the way through, and we're focusing on our sworn personnel first. So the good chunk of our sworn personnel have gone through this, and it's huge. I'll tell you one example of that is I got a call. It was probably only about 3 weeks ago from a crisis worker up in another county to the north of us, and they had been working with a couple people who were having a hard time. All of their group have been inmates at one time or another, and the conversation, she said the conversation wasn't really even about this, but the conversation came up about jail. And so someone mentioned they'd been in several different jails, and she said, well, what's the best jail? I don't know, is there a best jail? But I guess, so a weird question, right? But she said she was floored because without even a hesitation, two of them that had been in multiple jails said Utah County Jail. And she said, why? And she says, again, without hesitation, she says, because they treated us like humans. And then on top of it, they added their food was better. But but so for me, and I have this crisis worker that she's getting emotional over it. But for me, that's huge because I'm going, what, this is paying off. This is our deputies that whether they know it or not, they are treating these inmates, these people, in a way that they are humanizing them. And they've made mistakes in their lives. They've been sentenced to jail through the court systems, but they are making an impact on these people that is being noticed. And for me, it was huge to say, what, these things are working. And we're working on that with our deputies out on enforcement as well, with all of them, judicial, all of them. And another thing on an enforcement that's been huge is, when I first became sheriff, I challenged every single one of them and said, every day, I want you to take 20 minutes, at least 20 minutes of your schedule, whether you're called to call or whatever, but I want you to take 20 minutes and I want you to find a way to serve somebody. Whatever that is, you find a way to serve somebody. And those things, they've been doing. I get reports all the time. I just got one from a city that we have a contract with the other day. This was a contractor. He found my number and he called me up and he said, Sheriff, I just have to tell you something. He goes, I don't do this sort of thing, but I have to tell you something. We had an incident in this city today, and there was a crime aspect to it, but also at the same time, there was debris that as a result and a mess that had been left that was all over the place. And he says, your two deputies went out there and they just started cleaning it up. And he says, we went over and we're like, hey, you guys don't have to do this. We'll take care of it. And without hesitation, they said, this is our city. We want to clean this up. And they were so floored by that response. So, we're working on that to have these deputies have that mindset. And plus, what, it just helps you remember why you got into this profession. As a young officer, say, why do you want to get into law enforcement? Well, I want to serve people. I want to make a difference. And when we encourage them to serve, it reminds them why they got into it, and it starts that human connection again. And it's just been really positive. So, and those are things that, not that we need to track them, but they are tracked. They're citizen contacts that can be tracked.
They are tracked. Okay, because I was informed that they weren't tracked, and that could be very demoralizing to only track things like traffic stop and not to track the
Any contact with a citizen is tracked. You go in and you log what you were doing as a citizen contact. It's all tracked. Okay. So yeah, that's not true.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that there's people out there doing those kind of things. So I'm going to ask the harder questions, I guess. If these groups that you don't want to name were to come into our county, what is the protocol? How do you suggest dealing with people who would come to destroy businesses or to threaten. I have a personal interest in this because I was jumped by one of these groups in Washington for carrying a sign that had Martin Luther King's face and said character matters.
Mm-hmm. It's a
So
good
they
point.
it was a good sign. Yeah,
It
and
is
that's
a good sign.
that's where I stand, and I would hope that that's where most of society still stands. But I know that we're being trained to think differently about things and to make, and basically training people to become race essentialists. And I don't want to live somewhere that is
I don't either.
training,
I don't either.
especially those people that are to help us. I heard once, or I've heard recently, that there was a training for one kind of an emergency department that said that if there's a person of color in the car, you have to help them first if there's a car accident, and I would hope that that would not be the stance that anyone would be trained to do, because I have a son who looks like he is straight off the boat from Ireland. And I would hope that somebody would save his young self before me, just because I happen to be brown.
Yeah. So let me answer that question a couple ways. I'll go back to what I just brought up to answer what you were just saying. So part of the arbiter training that we're having our deputies go through, the core is to treat people like people. So for me, as I'm looking at, the implicit biases or anything else, if you can truly learn to do that, to see people as people, all of those other things should melt away, because we're all human beings, right? If that's really the core of what we're getting at, is treat people like people, all of these other things should melt away, and we're helping people and we're doing the right thing. It doesn't matter, what color somebody's skin is, what gender they are, what they identify as. They're a human being, and we're going to treat them that way. Now, as far as riots, protests, things like that, people do have a right to come in and do a protest, but they don't have a right to commit crime upon other people, to damage property, to obstruct traffic, to, all these other things that they just don't have a right to do. When this happened in 2020, I'll tell you the reality. Utah County, we've never really had that problem in Utah County. It really hasn't. Back in 2002, when the Olympics came to Utah, there was it's not really a riot squad, but just a mobile field force unit that was put together. There's a big trailer full of equipment in case there was any issues. There never really was. And so that equipment, over the years, the team just kind of fizzled out. So when this boiled up and cities were being burned across the nation, property damage across the nation, it's happening in Salt Lake, it's coming to Provo, we scrambled. And so as a sheriff, I'm offering resources to everyone around me, where I'm offering everybody I have, to help protect these areas, our SWAT team, our officers in judicial, our officers in the jail, our direct response team in the jail. So we quickly, I meet every week with the chiefs, every chief of police. We have a Zoom meeting, and then once a month we meet in person. So we quickly got on this and organizing, and we made a county-wide mobile field force. And together we pooled together and we bought the resources we needed to have a fully equipped mobile field force, which is in place right now. That it is done, it's in place, we have that. So we took that serious. We got that team in place. The things that happened in Pro were, they were handled. We offered our resources every time we were asked, and we were there for everybody that asked, and we would continue to do that. I don't believe these people that come to protest have a right to destroy property, to impede traffic, to overtake businesses, to do any of that stuff. They do not have that right. They have a right to be heard, but that needs to be done in a peaceful manner.
I totally agree. So the COVID, the lockdowns, we came when masks were almost a thing of the past. If that were to come again, masks, and I don't know if you even locked down businesses here, but as a sheriff, what is your stance on that?
Yeah, so I can tell you what my stance is, and even better, I can tell you what I did.
Okay.
So when that happened, of course, we had everything ramping up to the mask mandates. Remember the mass gathering mandates? Did you have those?
I don't think so.
So we actually had some mass gathering mandates that were put in place that you couldn't have, more, I'm thinking it was 10, I can't remember if it was 10 or 15 people.
Oh yeah, we were in Seattle. We had simply don't go outside.
Yeah, so we never quite got to that point, but
Yeah.
we had people calling the police on, people having a picnic in the park or too many cars at a residence. And I was shocked, honestly. I was shocked that we were getting those type of calls. I had wrote a directive to all of my deputies on how I felt about it, and that we would not be enforcing a mask mandate or a mass gathering mandate, that we would stand on the side of, if you want to wear a mask, wear one. If you don't. We're gonna support your constitutional rights and your freedom. I was very vocal about that. I caught a lot of heat for it. The media went after me for it. I took the bullets. In fact, in 2020, the Utah sheriffs, there's 29 sheriffs in the state of Utah, right? 29 counties. So we have an association, and in 2020, I was given the Lawman of the Year award by that association for my stance on these.
Just a second, you need to repeat that again. You cut out for a second.
We back?
You're back. Go ahead. So take it from in 2020, your stance. I think that should be fine.
So in 2020, did you miss all of my stance on that?
I don't think so. It just barely gave out.
Okay.
You know what? Go ahead and give it to me again. We'll just edit.
It's good. So the end of that was in 2020. I actually received an award from the Utah Sheriff's Association, and it was the 2020 Lawman of the Year award, and it was for my stance on these issues with dealing with COVID and the worldwide pandemic and supporting the rights of our citizens.
And that's exactly what you would do again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm biased, but that's really good to hear, because that was really hard, especially for young people.
Well, here's the thing. It hurt to see law enforcement across the nation behaving in the manner some of them did. And if my letter's out there, I mean, there's a couple of them, but my letter's out there. It's on, our Facebook and on the webpage, but it's still there. But for me, to go down that road, and I felt it was a betrayal to our citizens and to their trust in us. And it was a trust and a respect that we may never be able to recover, if you treat your citizens in that manner. And it was sad to see agencies do that. And we made sure in Utah County it didn't happen that way.
That's excellent. Getting close to the end, what would you do differently this term, if anything? What do you think needs to be improved?
Yeah, so we've worked on a lot of things throughout my term. I mean, from the start, we opened up the sheriff's office to an audit, and that's still an ongoing audit. We've had them audit our finances. We've had them audit our staffing levels to make sure that we were using staffing appropriately from administration down, and having the right scope of authority for those administrators. In some situations, we had one administrator who was overseeing, like in search and rescue, some of our other volunteer organizations, they were overseeing hundreds of people. And that becomes a little problematic with your scope of authority there and your control, making sure things are being done properly. So we had audits done in all those areas. Some of the things that we had audits done, they brought up issues with some of our equipment that wasn't being recapitalized, or there was no way once it expired that we could replace it. So, we looked at things like that. For instance, we had an airplane in search and rescue that's almost 60 years old. And you think about that, and a lot of people have 60-year-old vehicles, but usually, you drive them in a parade or take them to a car show. And we're putting our personnel up in this to fly and find people, in the mountains or over the lake, and these things that were unaddressed. So, by the way, we were actually able to replace that airplane. That was something that we worked hard to replace. So, but we looked at these things, and we started to identify them and recapitalize them, which means we're putting money, if I'm looking at a mobile command center and saying, it has a 20-year use of life. So in 20 years, how do we replace it? We're putting money in a bank account in a line item every year, putting money in that. So when its use of life comes up, I'm not going to be the sheriff in 20 years, but I'd like to leave the sheriff's office better than I found it. So whoever is will be able to replace that vehicle. So there's a lot of things we were doing that way. We've worked hard on with our employees on their wages to be able to get our wages up to be competitive, to be able to have the best officers. And for me, having the best officers, attracting the best officers, and then making sure their head's in the right place was huge. So we worked hard in having a mental health program and a wellness program for our officers. And it's taken me 3 years to get that funded, but I finally got it funded in the budget this year. So, we're rolling out this mental health program for our officers. And that's huge because when you look at the way they're interacting with community, this is a tough job. And there are a lot of scars you can get in this job, especially, I'll tell you, in our sex crimes unit, we have a sex crimes unit that is very active in what they're doing. We do several, aside from taking cases constantly, they do several proactive operations throughout the year. In fact, this year we've done 2. They just finished one up 3 weeks ago. And every time we do one of these operations, it's tens of thousands of dollars. We go out and we actually find, the reality is a lot of times donors find us because they want to help us, like Operation Underground Railroad has helped us before. So we get funding to run these operations. We have 4 more scheduled for this year, but we just finished one up.
And Operation Underground Railroad, that is about child trafficking, right?
Yes.
Because I was told that you had no child trafficking.
That's not true. No,
Okay.
That's absolutely not true.
Okay.
We just finished up an operation 3 weeks ago that we arrested 18 people that were actually coming to have sex with women and with children. So and child pornography. So we had those charges as well as trafficking charges in that operation. Before that, we did one we're the affiliate with the Attorney General's Office for ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children. So we just did an operation on that. So we're going out finding predators online who are trying to entice children online or sharing child pornography images. We just finished one of those up a couple months ago. So within this year, we've already done several. We've got several more planned. So I don't know where you're getting that information, but that is absolutely not true. And it's actually a kind of a slap in the face to how hard those detectives work. In fact, we've put in for more detectives in that area every year I've been in. And this year in my budget, I did get another detective for sex crimes. So that's being added right now. And as you look at that, you look at that's a huge problem in our community, unfortunately, but also so are many, many other things. I don't know if people realize that last year was the highest year this nation has seen in drug overdoses. And Utah County's been no different. There's one of the big drugs sweeping across the nation right now is fentanyl. Fentanyl is 100 times more potent than heroin. And so we're seeing overdoses all over the place. Just this year alone, we've been able to take, and we're in March, we've been able to take over 80,000 fentanyl pills off the street. And fentanyl pills are so potent that one pill can kill you. So, you can't, our resources are what they are, and we're always trying to add to those resources. You can only do what your budget allows you to do, and what commission they approve that budget. We ask for it, we don't always get it. So we have to take those resources and diversify and focus them in all the areas. You can't ignore. You could say we're not going to arrest DUIs, but then you have groups like Mothers Against Drunk Driving and people who have lost loved ones due to DUIs going, why do you not find this important? So we have all of these things that we have to address. We're responsible for safety up in the mountains or out at the lake or out in the desert. Utah County has over 2,000 square miles that we are responsible for. I don't know if people realize American Fork Canyon itself, millions of people in one little canyon in American Fork, millions of people recreate up that canyon every year. So we have teams that is their focus. They go up to keep those canyons safe for people to recreate, because you're having problems up those canyons. You're having drugs, DUIs, you're having people are camping or at picnics and their car windows are being broken out of. So we have to focus on all these things, and we have to be able to use our resources, with the broad vision of we have to cover all these problems. It would be nice if you could just have a limited scope and say, we're only going to look at this, but you can't. So we work on those. We try to increase it. The other huge one that's really affected us is emergency management with the worldwide pandemic. We've seen a huge need for our emergency management to be involved in this with the distribution of personal protective equipment and other things. We distribute all of that. One thing I don't think people probably have any idea that we do is homeless, right? So during the pandemic, what happened to the homeless if they got sick and nowhere to go? Any ideas? We secured an area for them in a hotel that we ran for them so that they had a choice to come to this hotel and stay in the hotel room while they were sick. We made their meals. In fact, we make in our kitchen, our inmates work. We have an industrial kitchen. They made all those meals. We made over 700,000 meals last year in that kitchen. 270, almost 270,000 of those meals were for Meals on Wheels, which are meals that go out to the elderly that are homebound and couldn't come out to eat. We got those out to all of the elderly. So there's so many parts of the sheriff's office. It's easy just to, pick at something and say, you should be doing this better, but something else is going to suffer because your resources are what they are. So you have to have a leader and a leadership team that has a broad focus of, we need to address all these issues and give them adequate and as much attention as we can. When we do sex crime things, for instance, with that team, we bring in other detectives and we do this huge combined operation. So we're always doing things like that. We're always working with other agencies also to pull in help from them or to help them, because in the end, criminals don't care what city you live in or where a city line is. So our focus is making sure Utah County is safe. We work cohesively with all the agencies because in the end, if a criminal lives in Lehigh, he doesn't just do crime in Lehigh, so.
Right, that's true. No, I think that answers all of my questions. I guess I do have one more, and I've just I may very well edit it, but I was told that the Utah Police Department is an old boys club. Do you have a response to that?
An old boys club?
An old boys club, like a clique.
That the sheriff's office? No, that's not true. You're always going to have someone that's disgruntled. That's in any organization, you're going to have that. And sometimes somebody needs to take a look in the mirror and say, why haven't I promoted? And it's, I've only been there now for just over 3 years. So if you've got people that are in an organization that haven't promoted under previous administrations all through their career, maybe it's time to take a look in the mirror and say, what do I need to do different to be a leader and to have these opportunities? So, when I came in, the same exact things were being said about the administration before me, that it was a good old boys club, same exact stuff. So as I've come in as sheriff, we've really looked at that. We have made promotions. All promotions go through HR. HR is not through the sheriff's office, it's through the county. So there is an absolute procedure that I don't have a choice over. These are county policies that we have to follow their policies. So there's a testing process that happens for promotions, and wherever people rank on that testing process, and there's people involved from the sheriff's office, from HR, from other departments, so they're outside entities too. They rank these, and so if you don't rank in a certain number, I don't even have a choice to look at you for promotion. I can only look at a certain
And is
group.
that like the typical woke stuff where you have to have somebody who fits into this box or that box? And
no, absolutely not. No, it is not. Because for me, I've been big as I came in as sheriff to say people, I want to use people for what their strengths are. I don't want somebody doing a job that they don't enjoy because they're just not going to do it well. So for me, career path is very important for somebody to decide, where's my strength? Where's my passion? Well, let's focus on that passion. And your passion, you may be very, very, very well or adept at it, but we put you in another position and you're going to fail, right? So for me, let's find that passion, and that's what I focus on. And I've made that clear in my administration. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know what job that you can hold where your boss is going to say, you know what, there's no performance matrix here, just do whatever you want. Wouldn't that be a nice job? And so you find people in this profession that's what they want to do. And when you're so for me, it's like, I care what you're doing. You've got to be doing something. You just can't check on and drive around in a car for 12 hours.
Right.
You've got to be doing something. And so that's what I'm looking at, is find your passion and let's get you doing it. But in the end, we need to keep Utah County safe. And that's our job. That's why we have law enforcement. So there is a job to be done. But I have absolutely pushed away from, I'm not a numbers guy. Numbers aren't important to me. I tell people when they start the sheriff's office that your application for wherever you want to go in this department starts today. It's on you. It's on you.
Right.
You,
Personal responsibility.
yep. So
Very.
sometimes the sad reality, and if you've been in leadership positions, you'll know this. Some people have a hard time looking in the mirror and saying, you know what, there's some things I need to work on.
Right.
And they'll just never get it. They'll never get it. And that's unfortunate, because if they could comprehend that, they could actually go places, and they'll hit that stumbling block time and time again. We try to help them work through it. Some people just are resistive of that. And I don't, I don't like that. I don't like that people get disgruntled that way, but at the same time, I am somebody that believes in accountability, and you need to be responsible for what you're doing. And for me, if something's not working out for me, I am always one that's going to go, okay, what can I do better? How can I do this better? And I think as a culture, as a human, that's how you grow. You have to be able to say, because we're all going to make mistakes. There's things that we're going to do that we absolutely could have done better, and we need to be able to learn from those and be humble about learning from those. But the good old boy question, no. Interesting enough, last night there was a meeting with the Fraternal Order of Police, the FOP, and that represents over 900 officers across Utah County. And so they held meetings where the candidates for several offices could come in and present to them, and then their delegates chose who they were going to stand behind or endorse. And I received a unanimous endorsement from that organization, which represents a huge number of my deputies as well as officers across this county, because they see what we're doing as a sheriff's office and how we're trying to work with everybody. And so their support is there. So I just tell you to say, you're always going to have somebody that's disgruntled.
Well, I
And
appreciate that you were willing to even get on and talk with a complete stranger when I have no skin in the game. I just want my county safe. That's it. I want my county safe for my child.
And I love that, because that's all I want to. I live in this county. The world is, from the time I took office of sheriff, it has just got more crazy. It seems like on a daily basis. And this next term, I don't think it's going to get any better. I hate to be pessimistic that way, but I just don't. I think it's still going to be trials going on throughout the world. And I'm here. I'm just like you. I'm here for my community. I'm committed. The office of sheriff is such an important office. It's so important to have an elected official that can stand their ground on issues like I did with the mandates and other issues, like I've done with the Second Amendment, like I've done on many, many things, to stand their ground and say, no, we're not doing that. I've been a chief of police. I understand how it works there. I've been a sheriff. I understand how it works on this side as well. And, I'm like you. I just want Utah County I have kids that live here that are raising families. I want Utah County to stay the special place that it is, because it is. It is a special place. And that unity that we have throughout law enforcement that we're fostering with other agencies is what will keep it special, because you don't see that everywhere. You just don't. I've had officials come in from out of state, from federal agencies, that I just had one about a month ago that came and met with me and said, Sheriff, can I come to one of your meetings with your chiefs? I have heard that you guys have something here that we're not seeing around. You have this unity with your agencies. I'm like, absolutely you can. So those things foster that, what's special about Utah County, and I'm all in for that. I'm an absolute team player.
I have one more thing. School board meetings.
Yep.
What would happen if they called and said, we need these people taken out of school board meetings? And I'm not talking about violence. I'm just talking about people who are standing up for their kids, because that's really where where I'm at. I go to these meetings and I stand up and I say, this is wrong. You need to stop. And this is why. And I don't yell and scream, but
that's a great
I've
question.
seen people taken out.
Yeah. And that's a great question. We've actually had, in similar things, we've had county commission meetings that people is a fair word to say excited, have been excited about a topic. So we've had people very energetic and excited about topics. And so we've had some commission meetings over the years that I've been sheriff where I've actually been asked if I could clear some people out, and I've refused to do it. I'll send deputies over because I think it's a fair trade. It's a public meeting. You have a right to be there, but at the same time, the people conducting the meeting have a right to have some decorum and respect in the room, right?
Absolutely.
So, so
I think when it comes to kicking people out because they choose not to wear a mask, that's when I go,
yeah, I'm with you.
if I'm talking to you like this, but with, but just not putting my mask on, that's not disrespectful. I'm like never, as a person of color, the whole idea, like, you have to work extra hard to not be the angry Black woman. So I'm always over the top pleasant because you just don't go to that route, And
Yeah.
again, something I'll probably cut or move into a different part, but I just wondered about that because.
Well, yeah, so that's where I stand on it. That's where I have stood on it. I've never been called to a school board meeting. Usually those will happen, if it's happening inside an incorporated city, the way our constitution works in the state of Utah and our codes that are legislated is cities, if you're incorporated, cities don't only just have a responsibility to provide public safety, they have to provide public safety. So that is on them. So as the sheriff, you're not their boss. I'm not the boss of these chiefs of police. And that's something that sometimes people don't understand, that I can't necessarily go and tell them how to do something. I can absolutely have relationships with them that we're working as a team to try to work things in a certain way with philosophies. And we do that constantly. But so some of those meetings, I know that, that people have seen things happen. That wasn't something that happened with the sheriff's office. But we've had similar things some of them were on masks, some of them have been on election issues that we've refused to do that, and again, it just comes down to it's a public meeting, but let's have some respect and decorum for each other on both sides of the issue.
Would you say that you 100% uphold the Constitution?
Absolutely, yes.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to ask if you would send me the training that you're doing, the book. I would just like to be able to share what that info is, if that's okay with.
Yeah, so I'll send it to you. And there's several books, but if you want to read Arbinger, you'll love it.
Arbinger, that's what it is. Okay.
It's Arbinger Institute. I'll send you the name of several books that you could read that you'll love. And then the one we actually chose to do our training on is The Outward Mindset. But they all kind of work together. The Anatomy of Peace is amazing. So I think you'd really love them.
What the Anatomy of Peace? This is totally different question, but I always build up my son's library for his birthday, and he's turning 14. Would it be appropriate? He's really smart.
Yeah,
okay.
It will be. Yeah, they are all interesting to read, so you don't get lost in just a whole bunch of different, leadership principles it's human behavior. It's learning to, if you're having a discussion with someone or an argument or whatever, it's learning to try to get out of your box and see things from their perspective and realize that, they're human just like you, and they have the things that have shaped them into who they are, and trying to see things from each other's point of view and how to move forward with that. They're awesome.
Okay, cool. Awesome. I really, really appreciate the time you've taken. Thank you. I'm sure Adam will edit this and have it up in the morning.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you.
Yes. Okay. Bye-bye.
Take care.